to the new podcast, Still Waters, where we introduce mental health with faith. My name is Ava.
My name is Dre. I am so excited to start this new podcast, Still Waters, and I really feel like it will help a lot of you out there who are struggling with mental health and how to get through it with Jesus.
Yes, so we are going to be talking about mental health and diving into the Bible and really just getting into the emotional depth of what people experienced in the Bible, and that emotional struggle was something that was here centuries ago, even before we were here, even before human race was populated all over the world. Like it's such a big thing, and we want to really dive into the emotional struggles and just really help y'all to understand that God doesn't really just want to help you cope with mental health. God wants to heal you. He wants to walk with you. He wants to help you find true freedom from mental health. This podcast is not about healing you in one episode. This podcast is not about, disregarding medication or therapy. Those are real things. Yeah. Those are things people need. Those are things, that's our disclaimer for this, especially this episode. Like, we're not disregarding medication. We're not disregarding therapy. Those things are real. Those are things people need. We just want to provide a way for you to have God and have medication, to use therapy and use God as a spiritual freedom, spiritual healing, and all those kinds of things. So today we are going to really be diving into four or five different point of views for just people who experience, I would say, some of the most traumatic mental health and mental illnesses and struggles and just things that we deal with today, and how we can take what we learn in the Bible, stories that are offered to us spiritually, and use them to help us today. And I think first we should start by giving a little background information on ourselves and why mental health means so much to really, I know, the two of us, and then also people in our lives who we know have experienced mental health personally. So I know for myself, mental health really started for me in middle school. Went through severe depression, like counseling sessions, like people reporting to my counselors that I was having suicidal tendencies and thoughts and all those kinds of things, and it just led to something. It led to, a suicidal attempt, and that was when I really met God and didn't know it at the time, and the anxiety, and I isolated myself from people. I pushed people away. I think was my biggest thing, was I wanted to be alone. I already felt like I was alone. I already felt like people didn't understand me, and I wanted nothing to do with people. And that's really hard for me because I'm such a people person, and anybody you can ask that I met in college, Drea, you can ask when I met in college, I'm so open. Yeah. I'm so extroverted, so it's like that really showed how much of a severe depression that I was in, and that brought on panic attacks and anxiety and anxiety attacks and all those other things. And I should have sought help then, but I didn't. That was probably some advice that I can give to anyone out there. Seek advice when you first realize it, or when you first know that you need help, because I didn't. And then, like I said, that led to a suicide attempt or almost suicide attempt and those kinds of things. And it was like those things could have been prevented if I just would have got help. So I feel like the depression, the anxiety, the isolation, the pushing people away, those are really just what I struggled with. And even now, even with my walk with God, it's still been difficult because, when you're walking with God, you're not walking with the enemy, and the enemy hates that, and the enemy wants you to walk with him. So there's so much spiritual warfare happening in your mind, in your body, and all those sorts of things. So I know that, being a Christian doesn't make things easier, but you have someone who hears you, who sees you, who's right there with you, and honestly, somebody who fights for you. And I think that's really helped me the most, is knowing that I've got God now, and like even the community of people that I'm surrounded by, and like not isolating myself when it gets hard, and like the groups that I'm in, the church that I'm involved in is just so amazing, and like helping me not really just cope, but find freedom and find peace in knowing that I'm gonna be okay, even if it doesn't look that way right now, because I've got a God who fights for me, and I've got a God who wants to be there for me, and a God who wants to not just heal me, but have a relationship with me. And that's the kind of God that he is. He doesn't just want to heal. He doesn't want to just watch you cope. He doesn't want to just give you the scripture and give you the things to heal you. He wants to have a relationship with you, to see you in his kingdom one day in heaven, and to know you personally. He wants to know you intimately. And God would have sent Jesus to die on the cross for us if that wasn't the case. I feel like it would be pointless if he just wanted to see us in heaven. Human race would have ended centuries ago after Jesus died and resurrected. There would be nothing after that if that was the whole point, but it's not, because Jesus wants to know us. And that's a little bit of my background. I'm going to let my co-host share hers.
Yeah, no, that was good. I would say my background started off in high school. I was actually diagnosed with moderate depression, and that's just suicidal thoughts, isolation, low self-esteem, things like that, similar to Ava's story. I would say that I was a very angry person growing up, and it was because of the depression that I was going through. And during that time, it was very noticeable, because I was always this talkative, bubbly person. So if I was quiet, it was very noticeable. So I would say that's where I met Jesus, and that time was the best time of my life. I was sitting in my room, and I was hopeless. I had doubts of my life. I didn't know who I was at the time. I was dealing with people I wasn't supposed to be dealing with, had friends who were very set apart from me. So I became really, really sad. And when I met Jesus there in my room, it was just like I felt his presence for the first time. And when I felt his presence for the first time, I just felt this wave of happiness. I felt the Holy Spirit. And it was something that I never wanted to let go again. Even though now I still deal with those things. Anxiety had creeped up recently. I would say that I'm much better than I was. And like she was saying, I believe that this will be our testimony for others out there like you all. And yeah, that would be my background and my experiences.
And we would love to share our full testimonies one day, hopefully.
Yes.
This progresses further than what we're expecting right now. If this progresses further, if it reaches people, if people want to hear our testimonies, we will for sure go in more depth. We can for sure go in 100% more depth of really what mental health does to you and does to your mind, and that's kind of what we're going to get into today, just not personally. But no, we want this podcast, the purpose of this podcast is to help those who feel like there's not a way out, to help those who are living in a darkness, to help those who feel like they're not worth it, or to feel like life's not worth it, or just I've tried all the things and nothing's working. I 100% agree that when I was going to the counseling in middle school and doing all the things, it did nothing for me. And that was just the honest truth. Again, not disregarding counseling, not disregarding medications or therapy or anything. I was in therapy last semester, and it helped me a lot. It gave me someone to talk to. It gave me just a way to express myself to someone who didn't know me, and it was very nice to have that. But the purpose of this podcast is to help those understand that some of the most righteous people, some of the most highly looked upon people in the Bible, people of God's time, people just you would have never thought would have experienced these things do, and things that we can relate to today. And that modern mental health is not just modern, it's been going on for so long, and mental health isn't talked about enough as it should be. And a lot of people, which there's a story we're going to talk about today, a lot of people lose their fight to mental health, and we want to prevent that. And the way we do that is spiritually, because we've experienced spiritual breakthrough in mental health. And both of us today, I know, when we struggle now with mental health, even though we both have, I would say, a good relationship with God, we both still struggle with things. I know personally I'm going through spiritual warfare right now. I'm dealing with, that anxiety comes up so much. Like, those things are just things that I have to fight with, or that God fights for me. And, it's a process, it's a thing, and, life happens. You're never going to prevent things from happening in life. And that's just the reality of it. But there are ways that we want to help or give just some insight to show you, like, hey, you're not alone. There are other people out there who have and are experiencing what you're going through. I can almost promise you that there's not something you're going through that somebody else hasn't experienced, that maybe one of us has, or, one of these people in these stories have experienced. Like, you're not alone in this, and there is a way out, and there is hope. And it was one of the things you said, like, about hopelessness, and I know I experienced that myself. Like, I gave up on life. I saw no hope for life, and I found out that was a lie, and it was a lie from the enemy. It was a lie that I told myself. It was a lie that I just believed, and that was very far from the truth, because there is hope. And there are so many ways to find hope, and one of the ways that we discovered was Jesus, and he can heal you. And so that's why we want to talk about 4 specific people, I would say, really, that we want to dive deep into, and just talk about their story, give scripture, talk about specifically what they went through, and just give you some hope, and how they overcame it is similar to how you can overcome it. And
I would say one of my questions was, when I was going through depression, is like, who is out here going through what I'm going through? Like, I wanted to know if someone was going through the same thing, and I never knew that there's actually characters in the Bible, real people, who are going through the same thing that you are going through. So we're going to go ahead and dive in.
Yes.
The first story that I know that you would like to highlight is the Elijah story. So
Elijah, the prophet.
Yeah,
he was a very, very devout prophet to God and God's kingdom, and doing what God called him to do. So I think we're gonna start in 1 Kings 19 is where we really start with Elijah, and I would say it really starts at the beginning of 19. So when you get there.
Sorry, I'm not.
This is a chill podcast.
Podcast.
We're not
and we're going to put the verses up there for you to follow along with us.
Yes.
If you'd like to.
Yes.
Bring your Bibles and get comfortable.
Yes. And I have a new international version, so mine may sound different, but
same as me.
Yes.
I have NIV too, so
it's worded a little differently than like New King James, but it's the same context. They're just different translations. So I'm gonna read a little bit, or read a good bit of the story that we need for this.
Yeah.
So but I'll start at the very beginning of 19 and verse 1. When Ahab got home, he told Jezebel everything Elijah had done, including the way he had killed the prophets of Baal. So Jezebel sent this message to Elijah. May the gods strike me and even kill me if by this time tomorrow I have not killed you just as you killed them. Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. Then he went on alone to the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. Then he lay down and slept under the broom tree. But as he was sleeping, an angel touched him and told him, Get up and eat. He looked around, and there beside his head was some bread baked on hot stones and a jar of water. So he ate and drank and lay down again. Then the angel of the Lord came again and touched him and said, Get up and eat some more, or the journey ahead will be too much for you. So he got up, and ate and drank, and the food gave him enough strength to travel 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. And that's where I'll kind of stop, because that's really the gist of what we're talking about here today. Elijah's an interesting one to start with because we start off very strong. I feel like because we literally see here where Elijah is praying for death. He is praying, God, take my life. He's praying basically what some people have thought to do. Like, we don't pray to God, take my life. We do it ourselves. And so I think that's where more of the modern part comes in, is like, people back then, when they wanted to die, they didn't do it themselves. They really prayed for God to take their life because they believed that God was in control of their life. And so, and today that's, just not the case. Elijah was a righteous man, like we talked about. He was a prophet. He spread God's word. He did what God asked him to do. He obeyed God. This is in the Old Testament, so he was here before Jesus came, and prophets were there to kind of prepare the way for Jesus and or the Messiah's coming. So that was what Elijah did, and already that's a lot of pressure. I feel like on him, and that's another big thing with mental health today, is like we put ourselves under so much pressure and so much expectation on who we're meant to be or our purpose, or like, if we don't do certain things, we're not enough, or just so much pressure that's not necessary, so much pressure that God doesn't put on ourselves. God calls us to do things, God asks us to do things, and we obey. But if we mess up, or if we don't do it the right way, or we sin, or we fall into just temptation, or like, we make mistakes. But God doesn't condemn us for those. And it's like, God's not putting that pressure on us. We are. Our minds are putting that kind of pressure on us. And I feel like it's so important here because Elijah was the type to, I feel like with his story, he put a lot of pressure on himself to do certain things. And I think that's why when when this moment happened, he was afraid. He fled for his life. He was threatened. He didn't know what to do because he thought he was doing everything God asked him to. And
so we can relate on that, because even though we are followers of Jesus here now, we still deal with fear, anxiety, depression, things like that. And he was a prophet, so he's out there telling people about God, and still even he was afraid of God's plan for his life. And so I would say that I could really relate to that.
And even though like he was a prophet and he followed God and he did all these things, he still struggled with mental health. And like I feel like that's such a big misconception now in today's society, is like when you struggle, or when you're a follower of Christ, you don't struggle. You don't deal with mental health. You don't deal with the things that people who aren't followers of Christ deal with. And that's such a lie. Because I feel like I was saying in the beginning, like when you walk with God, you're not walking with the enemy. And in the spiritual sense, that's, the enemy doesn't like that. The enemy wants you walking with him, so it's kind of like a tug of war back and forth between you and the enemy. or between God and the enemy. And so, like, I feel like it's so important. It's such a misconception that, you know, no matter how far along you are in your walk with Christ, we still struggle. Everybody struggles. I feel like not the same, but everyone has some struggle with mental health. No matter religion, no matter race, no matter your gender, your sex, whatever.
Yeah.
Everyone has experienced mental health. I don't think there's some form of mental health we've all struggled with, and with Elijah, we see his is, you know, he was fearful. Mm-hmm. It says he was afraid right here in verse 3. He was afraid and fled for his life. He ran, and
yeah, even though he was running, God still met him where he was. It says, all at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." So God is going to meet you where you are at, no matter what you're dealing with, no matter what you're going through, no matter if you're talking to him or not. God will meet you right there, and it says, "Get up and eat." And as we were talking earlier about this, Ava had mentioned that you got to take care of yourself. That's something that you really need to do. I know it's easy. The enemy would tell you to isolate yourself. Don't eat. Don't do this thing. Because he wants to do 3 things: steal, kill, and destroy you during this time. So I would say it's very important to, even when you're going through the struggles, is to just sit back and rest and listen, because God will. And he does talk to you. And he does hear every single cry that you, every single tear that falls from your face.
Yeah.
And so let's dive deeper. So what is the other verse that we had on this one? Or that one?
I think I think it was when you go further into the story, you really see how God continued to call him to do his assignments for him. And he continued to, and like you said, he met him where he was, and he continued to ask Elijah, "Hey, you know, serve me," or like, serve the Lord, and, you know, like, don't give up hope, because what I've called you to do is bigger than you yourself. And so, like, because, and it's important to note too, like, in that isolation is where the enemy gets you. The enemy isolates you. The enemy wants you to be alone, because that's where he can attack you and get you at your weakest. And so when the angel came to Elijah and told him, "Get up and eat," or "Get up and eat some more, or the journey ahead will be too much for you," the angel was also there to remind him, "Hey, you can't be alone," or, "Hey, you're not alone. We're here," and like, God will meet you where you're at. You're never alone, even when you're alone at home in your room, or you're like wherever you are alone. You're truly not alone, because God is always there. Whether you're religious, whether you believe in him or not, he's still there. And I feel like whether you believe in him or not, it's still comforting to know that there's someone that cares enough about you that's out there who isn't going to leave you alone. And so I just think it's really cool that God did not condemn him for praying to die. Like, God did not condemn him. God did not make him feel bad for praying that. God did not say, "Well, why would you doubt me? Why would you say such things? You're my prophet. Like, I like, this isn't what I asked you to be. This isn't who I, whatever." Like, God continued to be like, "Hey, I've got plans for you. Hey, I've got more for you. Hey, you're not done yet." And I love that, because it's one of my favorite things is when it's like a quote, or it's just something like we just love to say. It's like, when God wakes you up every morning, he's not done with you. If you're not dead, he's not done.
No.
So I feel like for Elijah, that was so important. God didn't take his life. He prayed to God to take his life, but he didn't, because he had greater things in store for Elijah, and that gave Elijah a hope that he could hold on to. And like, after that, Elijah was like, all right. And I like you said that about the eating and resting and drinking, because those are like three of the most important things that we need. Like, you know, rest, eat,
and then the enemy will try to take that away from you.
Exactly. And that's why when we get in these positions, I know for me, when I was in middle school, like, I got so, like, thin. Like, I did not want to eat. I didn't eat when I was depressed. I didn't. That's why it's such a vital symptom. Is like, it's not only psychological, but it's also like, when you're not doing those things, you feel worse off about yourself. You feel weak, and that's another way the enemy tries to weaken you, is by bringing in those thoughts of like, hey, you don't need to eat, you don't need to drink, you don't need to rest. That's not important, but it is important, and God makes that apparent that it's important. Like we said, God's not just worried about your spiritual connection to Him. God's not just worried about you getting into heaven. He's worried about you. He loves you. He cares about you personally. And I think Elijah's story really shows that. And the angel coming to her, really God sent that angel to Elijah for that reason, to be like, hey, it's not over. And for anybody that has had those suicidal tendencies or the ideation, that it's real. Like, God's not done with you. If you're still here, He's not done with you. If you wake up every morning, if you've got breath in your lungs, if you walk through every day with just whatever you're dealing with, it's not easy. We're not bypassing what you're going through, but there is more on the other side. There is another day ahead. You're here, and God, you're here for a reason. And so I feel like just Elijah's story is so perfect for,
so relatable.
Perfect for not giving up. Like, just, we want to give up so much. That was my story. I wanted to give up. I had given up. But I relate so much to Elijah's story, because God, when I wanted to give up, God didn't let me give up. God was like, okay, you may give up on yourself, but I can't let you give up. I'm not done with you. I have more that I'm going to do through you. And so He did the same with Elijah. He was like, I'm not done with you. I'm not going to take your life, because you still got more to do. Yeah. And I feel like that's just, I don't know how to go from there. Like,
that's really good. It's a very good story. And the story doesn't end there. But we're going to move on to another.
Yes, so that was Elijah.
Person. Hannah. Let's talk about Hannah.
Hannah's,
for all the ladies out there.
For all the ladies. for all the females. We're not just talking about men here. No. We're going through all of the different stories.
Hannah is in Samuel. First Samuel.
1 Samuel 1, I think.
Yeah.
1 Samuel 1, I think 4 through 20 was what we planned. If I can find my reading.
But yeah,
do you want to read it?
I have no idea where we are. Just give us a rundown of like who Hannah was and what she went through and stuff like that.
Pretty much Hannah was married to Elkanah, who had two wives, which was Hannah and Penina, or Penina. Yeah. Penina had children, and they were both married to Elkanah, and Hannah could not bear children. I don't know if, we're not really clear if it was medical. We're not really clear if, it was something else going on.
Yeah, just during this time she couldn't.
But it just says, in 1 Samuel she couldn't have children. But when we start at verse 4, just to give a little insight, I'm going to read verse 4 and just go. On the days Elkanah presented his sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to Penina and each of her children. And though he loved Hannah, he would only give her only one choice portion because the Lord had given her no children. He would only, so Peninnah would taunt Hannah and make fun of her because the Lord had kept her from having children. Year after year, it was the same. Peninnah would taunt Hannah as they went to the tabernacle. Each time Hannah would be reduced to tears and would not even eat. Why are you crying, Hannah? Elkanah would ask. Why aren't you eating? Why be downhearted just because you have no children? You have me. Isn't that better than having 10 sons?
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a lot we can say there, so I'll stop there for now. First, we can talk about
comparison.
The fact that she was taunted by her other, her husband's other wife. Like, I mean, you know, what do you really do in that scenario?
Bullying. I know many people who have. Me personally, I never got bullied in school.
Yeah. I experienced a good bit of it when I was maybe really younger, but really in middle school too. You know, I hung out with different people. I didn't do all the normal things, like, you know, I wouldn't say I was like a shy, like introverted person, but you know, I didn't follow with the crowds that was considered popular at my at my middle school or whatever. And I didn't really follow the trends or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I mean, when you're really taunted and bullied, or I guess really in this scenario when it comes to, and this can relate to guys too. Guys can put themselves in this position of a female. Yeah. Not necessarily with the birth, but like when females are being taunted by other females because they don't have what they have, it's so easy for comparison and insecurity to creep in, because it's like you start to question, like, well, why don't I have these things that these people have? Am I not enough because I don't have what they have? And in Hannah's situation, she, you know, may have felt like she wasn't enough because, or that the Lord didn't see her as enough because she gave his other wife 10 children and she had none. And so it's like she didn't feel worth it to her husband. She may not have felt worth it to God. And then she obviously, you know, had a lot of self-hatred and like self-insecurities that were created. And it's horrible because comparison, I know for me, like I struggle with it today. Like comparison and insecurities are like such a big issue today, and especially when with, you know, they didn't have this back then, like tying into modern mental health, like social media now we have that plays into a factor that like, you know, you have Snapchat, you have Instagram, you have TikTok, you have whatever other apps there are out there, like, and those just create so much more because we do what Hannah does. We look at other people's lives and we see that we don't have what they have. And then we start to question God. We start to question, well, are people going to see me the same? Are people going to treat me the same? And like, you know, they're all lies, of course. They're all, they're real feelings or real things that we deal with. But they're lies, and it's just, you know, God doesn't see you as any less than the person sitting next to you. He doesn't see me as any less than you. He doesn't see me as any more than you. Like, we're equal in God's eyes, especially females. It says in the Bible that we are more precious than rubies to God, but we are all on that level. We are all as equally as important. We are all beautifully and fearfully, wonderfully made in His image, and it's the same for guys. Like, you know, I know it may be hard for guys, but it's like you read the verse, "You're beautifully and wonderfully made." Like, you know, it may be hard as a guy to be like, well, am I beautiful? But like, you are. Like, for guys out there, and this podcast is not just geared to females, it's geared to all, you know, to both sexes, for male and female, and like to anyone out there, any race, any religion, any way you position yourself, is like, these are all real things that we all struggle with. And these things that we're talking about today, depression, hopelessness, all the mental health things, they don't have a boundary. They don't stop at females. Like, depression doesn't stop at females. Anxiety doesn't stop at females. Pressure, expectation, comparison doesn't stop at females. I know that's such a big thing, and it's such a misconception with like modern mental health. Is like it can only be something a girl goes through because we struggle with physical appearance, but it's a guy thing too. I mean, imagine how many guys struggle with body image. Like, there's so many guys out there who struggle with, well, am I enough? Like, we ask ourselves, are we enough for that guy? Well, they ask themselves the same question: are they enough for a girl? Like,
are they tall enough? Are they strong
enough? Are they built the right way? Like, and that's such a lie. Like, God doesn't ask us to think like that. And you know, for Hannah's situation, it was hard for her because she felt like she had nobody, even though. And that's when we get into the next part where her husband's literally asking her, "Why are you crying? You have me. Is that not enough for you?" And I think it's also important to note, like, I feel like in a way, Elkanah, her husband, really disregarded her feelings about the situation. Like, he couldn't really see that she was struggling, and that it was like, I feel like Hannah's story also, and we'll talk a little bit more about it with the next part of her story, but she's very misunderstood. And she's very, like, looked down upon for having these emotions, and the one person who did it was God. The one person who was like, hey, I hear your cries. I hear you. I'm listening. I'm right there with you. Like, I'm not condemning you. I'm not misinterpreting your feelings. But Elkanah does, and it's like, why be downhearted just because you have no children? He says that, and I remember when I first read that, I was like, really? I was like, oh, okay. Like, you know, that's her husband.
And some people are not going to understand your struggles because they never went through them.
Like, you know, we all, you know, we struggle with the same things. There's people out there who struggle with what you struggle with, but there's also people out there who aren't going to understand you necessarily. And that's okay. Like, it's okay when people don't understand you, but it's never okay to disregard someone's feelings just because we don't feel that way. Like, even though I may not struggle with something that Dree is going through, I'm not going to sit here and be like, why are you upset about that? Just because I don't know how that feels. Like, we all struggle, and it's another really big, you know, like, just problem today is, like, people people just assume that because they're not going through what we go through or what they're going through, it's okay to be like, well, why are you so upset? And that's such a big thing that's said. I feel like I hear that so much more than I should. It's like, why are you upset about that? Or
especially with men. You know, they have this image of, like, they're supposed to be, you know,
they're supposed to be
boys
strong.
don't cry and
boys
stuff
are
like that.
Weak if they cry. That's a lie. And I'm going to say that right now. Anyone that tells you that is just, like, may not understand it, but it's a lie. And we'll talk about that later when we get into Jesus. Like, we'll talk about that because, you know, he was the Son of God. He was the Son of Man. He was a man here on earth. And we're going to get into that whole thing. And it's a whole other story, a whole other rant that we're going to get into later on. But, I mean, I just feel like the way we view women's mental health versus men's mental health is so different. And I feel like that's such a stereotype when we think about it. Granted, the things we deal with may be different because we're different genders.
We're wired differently.
We're wired differently. We think differently. We mature at different ages. So it's like completely understandable. It's just there's so many other misconceptions. It's like that's not true, and that's not the way. That's not what God says about it, and that's not what He intended it to be. We're all, you know, right there equal. And so later on, I don't really have to read all of it, but
Hannah shows us what to do. She gives us a great example of what to do when you are misunderstood, when you're being taunted, bullied, or whatever the case may be, or when you really want something. You know, that desire in your heart isn't there for no reason. So she shows us how she continues to pray to the Lord.
She doesn't stop praying, and I feel like that's so beautiful, the way that she doesn't, I mean, it says that she was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord. But she didn't really give up hope.
Yeah, she was honest with the Lord.
She didn't hide from the Lord. She didn't hide the way she was feeling, and I feel like that's so important for us today. Not even just with God, but like, don't hide from God. Don't hide from people. Don't hide your mental health, because that's the worst thing you can do.
That's the number one the enemy is gonna do.
That's what he wants you to do, because when he does that, he can bring in the suicidal ideation. He can bring in the hopelessness. He can bring in the loneliness, and then when we're lonely, that's just kind of it. And it's not true. And so with Hannah, she prayed. She talked to God. She let him know. I feel like that's just my advice about praying to God and about talking to people and getting help. Don't be afraid to tell people how you feel.
Yeah.
Tell people how you feel. Tell them how you feel. I know with Drea, I'm going to tell her how I feel.
Yeah.
I know with my therapist, I was going to tell her how I felt. And then with God, I'm the same way. Like, I don't talk to anybody the way that I talk to God. But I still am honest with the close people in my life. I'm honest with God. And that's the best thing. The best thing you can do is be honest about how you're feeling. And the best thing you can do is be aware of how you're feeling. Because when you're not aware, and when you kind of push them to the side like they're not there, that's when it grows, and that's when it just keeps building and building. And then at one point it's going to explode. Yeah. And that's what we don't want. That's what we're here to prevent. That's what the point of this is, to show how these people
don't explode.
Most of them didn't explode and didn't.
One of them did, but
one of them did. But we're hopefully gonna prevent more of that in the future from happening, because it's the story we talk about it's a real thing, and it happens, and we're gonna be real about it. But and the only thing I really wanted to say about Hannah was later on with the misinterpretation was when she was praying to the Lord, and there was a man named Eli who was watching her. It says he saw her lips moving, but he heard no sound, and he thought she had been drinking. He thought she was drunk. And he was like, "Must you come here drunk? Throw away your wine." And she was like, "Oh no, sir, I haven't been drinking wine or anything. I'm just discouraged, and I was pouring my heart out to the Lord. Don't think I am a wicked woman, for I have been praying out of great anguish and sorrow." And he said, "Go in peace. May the God of Israel grant your request." And he understood that he misinterpreted the situation. But I just feel like it's another example of, we misread things. We misread people. We misread what people are going through. And it's like, we can't jump to assumptions when people are dealing with things. And it's like, people need help. And I feel like, in this case, it didn't happen. But because of, I've heard stories where people have been misjudged, and it's led to them hiding. And it's led to them isolating, being like, well, now I can't show how I feel, because I'm going to be judged for it. I'm going to, he thought Hannah was drunk. And she was praying to the Lord. Like, what?
Like, imagine that. Like someone comes up to you, like, you're drunk, and I'm praying.
I'm praying to God. So I feel like that was just another really cool thing that happened. And thankfully he knew he had missed it. And he was like, may God grant your request. And later on,
her desires were fulfilled.
Yes. So she, she ended up the next time she slept with her husband, it says the Lord remembered her plea, and in due time she gave birth to a son. And I feel like the in due time is such a
very important.
It's such a Rima word, really. For a lot of people, it's like in due time, because it's gonna be in God's timing. Yeah. It's not gonna be in ours. In due time. I feel like God says that to us a lot, and we don't hear it, or we kind of just we don't want to hear it. But it's like, in due time, I'm gonna give you what you request, or I'm gonna bring greater things than you could have ever imagined. Yeah. And he did, and he ended up giving her a son named Samuel that the Lord blessed her with, and she lived a life. Yeah, lived her life.
She lived her life.
God didn't leave her. God answered her prayers, and he was right there with her while they weren't being answered. And I feel like that's important too. The Lord was right there with her. The Lord was looking upon her and sitting there with her as she cried. But just in his timing, he was going to give her what she requested. But
in his timing.
In his timing. It's such a Rhema word. Yeah. I know it's a Rhema word for me. In due time.
In due time. And so she had to wait.
She had to wait. And healing's not a like that.
Yeah.
Healing, for people who are watching this who are dealing with mental health or watch this because of mental health, healing's not going to happen after this video. Healing's not going to happen while this video is happening. Healing's not going to happen next week. Healing's not going to happen. Healing is an ongoing process because we're always going through things and we're always having to go through processes of healing. Yeah. But healing's never ending, but it does get better. It's just going to be with time. And, it's hard because, I know for me especially, it's hard because I'm an impatient person and waiting is just difficult for me. But that's what God asks us to do in situations because while we're waiting, He's going to heal us. And then when it comes, our blessing will come like it did for Hannah with her son. So, Hannah's a great story.
Speaking of waiting, our next story is the great famous Job.
I know Job's a popular guy in the Bible. Especially with his struggles, I feel like if one of the top people that struggled with alive, it was Job,
and had to wait and constantly wait.
Yeah, and really, we're gonna go through verses and then talk about what those verses mean because Job has a whole book, like tons and tons of chapters, 42 chapters of Job. So we don't necessarily have time to read all of that. But I recommend Job to anybody, even if you're looking for a book to study in the Bible and you haven't read Job. Job is such a good one.
Yeah.
But I know the first one that I found that I would love to read is Job 3:11. And it says, "Why wasn't I born dead? Why didn't I die as I came from the womb?" I feel like if there's any better way to put that, I feel like it's similar to Elijah. It was he wanted to die. There was nothing for Job, or Job was losing everything. He endured the power of Satan. A little bit background on Job's story, I guess is really important. Satan came to the Lord because if there's one thing, little Bible teaching here, or a little spiritual lesson, or from what I know I've learned, Satan answers to God. Satan answers to the Lord. There's nothing that Satan can't do that he has to ask the Lord to do it.
Right.
So even Satan works under the authority of Jesus, just like the rest of us work under the authority of Jesus. Not work, but we follow under the authority of Jesus. Even Satan does.
Yeah.
And he was sent. He was struck down to hell because he didn't want to follow Jesus, and he still does. And it's so crazy to me that's just crazy. And so with Job, Satan had to go before the Lord and ask the Lord to mess with Job, to take these things away.
Because Job was
faithful. Yeah, Job was a righteous man. So. He followed God. He had faith like no other person. He was a close follower of God. And Satan asked him, well, let me try. Let me see what I can do to tear him down. Let me see what I can do to make him lose his faith in you. And the Lord was like, okay, do it. Because he's not going to lose his faith in me. He's not going to stop being my follower. And you can, read the story and it'll give you, specifics on what was actually said. That's just a little gist.
So Job went through all these trials and tribulations. Everything got taken from him.
His family was killed. His wealth was taken. His house was destroyed.
Yeah. Then he got a disease.
he was put on disease. I think multiple diseases were put onto him. He was like, he had things like growing on him. I think he had like warts and like just things that was
just the worst of the worst.
He had it all. Like, so when Satan said, "Let me try anything," he tried everything.
He tried everything. Yeah.
And that's where we get into, and that's what, you know, Job 3:11 that I just read came from. You know, why didn't I die coming out the womb, Lord? Why am I not dead? Because he, in a way, he would rather have been dead than to have dealt with all those things.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we've felt
that's
felt
relatable.
that way. Like, that's how I felt when I was in, you know, when I went through what I went through. But it's like, I would rather be dead than have to deal with these things that I'm struggling with. Like, what's the point? I guess is really the best. Like, what's the point in all this? Because it pretty much feels like death what we go through. So, I mean, that's such a real thing that I feel like we feel today, and that people feel all the time today. Not necessarily going like, you know, why wasn't I dead? And like coming out the womb.
Yeah.
But it's like, why am I having to go? Like, I would say my interpretation, or the way we can take from that verse, is like, why do I have to go through this?
Yeah.
Why am I dealing with this? Why am I not just? Why can't you just let me die?
Yeah.
You know. And that's just a really, really good verse on, you know, wishing, and also wishing you were never born. Like, a lot of people I feel like have dealt with that. Like, wishing you were never born. Like, some people were like, well, I didn't want to be born. I didn't ask to be born.
Yeah. Or I didn't ask to go through this and stuff like that.
But I guess I also can pull out the verse of Psalms 139 while I'm talking about this. What is it? Psalms 139, 13 through 17. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous, how well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion and as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God, they cannot be numbered.
That's good. Yeah.
I mean, God created us all for a purpose. He wrote our stories before we were put into our mother's womb, before that 9 months even started. And so, like, you know, wishing we were never born is so real. It's such a common thought, which, I mean, it's very sad that we have to resort to that kind of thinking, or that the enemy creates those thoughts in us that is like, well, I just wish I was never born so I didn't have to deal with this. Yeah. But it's like, you know, God created us with purpose. God made each and every single one of us, put us here for an individual purpose. Because not two of us are on the same path. Not two of us are here for the same things. Like, it's real, and that thought is so real. But we can find hope in knowing that God has a purpose for you, and that God wanted you to be born for a reason. God has something that's greater than those thoughts that you're having currently. And so, I think the next verse was Job 3, 25. Job 3:25. Let's see. 25 to 26. Yeah. What I always feared has happened to me. What I dreaded has come true. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest. Only trouble comes. That's real. Yeah. I have no peace. I have no quietness. I have no rest. Only trouble keeps coming. Yeah. Like, what are you supposed to do when all that's coming in your life is trouble? Like, what are you supposed to do when it feels like everything you're going through is just trouble? Like the next day, something new. The next day, something new. The next week is more. It's like, well, I can't rest. I have no peace. I have no quietness. I'm surrounded by chaos. I'm surrounded by just like the noise. I'm surrounded by restlessness, and it's like that's true, and that's what's happening, but it doesn't have to be that way. Because we can find peace in God. we can find quietness within His presence, and we can find rest within His presence, because He tells us to rest. He asks us to rest. He's like, you, in Psalms 23, He makes us rest. He doesn't ask. He makes us, because we need it. We saw that with Elijah. We need rest. We need peace. We need the quiet time, because if we don't, we're going to lose our minds.
Yeah.
Like, it's so real when we get caught in so much chaos. I know for us, we're college students. We're nursing students.
Yeah.
So it's like we're surrounded by chaos. And then we have life on top of that. And then we have the other things, the other extracurriculars or extra things that we do that we're also surrounded with. And it's like, it can get too much. So it's like we have to find that quiet time with God. We have to find that, we have to go to God for peace, because if we don't, we're not going to have any. And we're not going to have rest if we don't really ask for it. I mean, when we ask God for rest, He'll give it to you. You just have to let Him. And I feel like that's another thing too. You have to let Him give it to you. If you just ask for it and you wait for it, you have to open your heart up to Him. You have to open yourself and say, okay, I'm receiving it. Like, give it to, or like, I ask for it.
Yeah.
And, you know, He'll give it to you. And it's just, when that chaos comes, the mind is so constricted. Yeah. And then it's like, you feel like you're stuck.
Like the enemy gets louder and louder.
The enemy just, it's just chaos. And then all you can hear is the enemy. And then it's like, I can't take it anymore. And you like explode. Like, it's like all these things are happening and you're like, you lose it. And that's where anger and the frustration and that's where like the depression and
isolation and all that.
Isolation comes in, and it's like, that doesn't have to be the case, because God provides a way out of that, and He provides a way that life's gonna happen, chaos is gonna happen, things are gonna happen.
And He tells us that.
He tells us that, And I mean, in the Bible it says that. But He tells us we don't have to live there. He tells us we don't have to stay there. And He fights those battles for us. He blocks out the chaos for us. He fights those battles. He works out that chaos for us. If we do our part and we rest and we go to Him, really, for that. So that's why I really liked that verse. There's a couple more that I guess we can quickly run through, because there's a lot actually. Job 19:13 through 14. Job 19:13 through 14. My relatives stay far away, and my friends have turned against me. My family is gone, and my close friends have forgotten me. Wow. That's loneliness. And he's really telling himself that he's lonely. My close friends have forgotten me. My friends have turned against me. Yeah. I mean, it was real. His family was gone. He lost his family. And it was great. Job went through a lot of grief as well, because he lost so much. And we lose so much every day. Really, we lose family members and loved ones. Things happen that we don't have explanations for, and we lose possessions, we lose people, friends leave. We don't have control over those things, and that's just real. And that's it's okay too, though, because again, God has greater things, and God will bring those things in His timing. Yeah. But you're not alone. I feel like if there's ever been a time, like for me, I know it was especially real. If there's ever been a time you truly felt like you had no one, like not even family, not even your best friend, not even whoever you felt like you could trust the most, even if you didn't even feel like you had anybody, you have God, you have Jesus. He's right there. He's always there. And but it's a real feeling that Job went through. I mean, yes, he lost his family, but even his friends were not there. He felt like his friends, he couldn't talk to his friends. And you do see it in Job too, that most of his friends questioned him. They questioned why he still had faith in God. They questioned why he kept so much faith in God through the things that he went through. And it's real because, I mean, I know for me, I've struggled with my faith when things happen. Like, I really have, because you don't understand. And that's the enemy creates this doubt in in who God is. And it's just a real thing that Job went through, and it's a real thing that we deal with, is thinking that we are forgotten. I know for me, I hate being forgotten. Especially to people that mean a lot to me. And in moments when I feel like I am being forgotten, it creates hurt. It creates just this sort of depression, this sort of like, what am I supposed to do? It creates anxiety because you're like, well, I can't let them forget me. And you do everything you can to make sure they haven't forgot you. And then I feel like for most cases, in some cases it's not, but for most cases, that your friends or whoever you feel like's forgotten you, they're like, what? They're like, I haven't forgotten you. I'm right here. And we just create those thoughts. And the enemy and even ourselves, our flesh creates those thoughts. Like, you're alone. Like, there's nobody. You have nobody. Nobody understands you. Nobody's there for you. And that's a lie.
Yeah, and then it can create like this type of bitterness of like, they're not there for me when I'm there for them. I know that has happened to me a lot. And so, like you said, those are lies from the enemy.
Yeah.
And especially when you're going through a lot of stuff, the enemy's going to try his best. When you're at your weakest, your lowest. But,
yeah. It also says it in Job 19. I'm saying, my close friends detest me. Those I loved have turned against me. I mean, what do you do when your loved ones turn against you? You really at that point, you feel so alone. And it's like, it's just the reminder, you just need that reminder that God is there. He sees you. He hears you. He's right there. If anyone's not going to leave you, it's him. Even in the times that you don't believe in him, even in the times that I know I've doubted him, or I've been like back in high school, really, I was like, well, God, if you're real, where are you? You know, why are you not answering me? Why aren't these prayers being answered? Or I'd just be like, God, why? And I've been angry at God. I know we've talked about this a lot. Being angry at God is such a real thing. Like, and you have to take that up with him. And like, he's not going to be mad at you. He knows that he already knows you're mad at him. You might as well
so
tell
you
him.
Go ahead and say
you might as well talk to him about it.
He can handle it.
And you might as well.
He can handle it.
And I know you're the one that told me about it, and I didn't know this was a thing. It's like, you know, they teach you, forgive others. They teach you need to forgive yourself. But what they don't teach you is sometimes you need to forgive God. Sometimes you need to be like, God, I forgive you. I'm sorry I was mad. I'm sorry I said these things. I'm sorry, I know people who have cussed God out. I know people who have been like, you, like,
why did you do this to me?
Like, why would you put me through this? And it's like,
why did you let this happen?
Like, even say, God, I'm sorry I questioned. Or not, I mean, we can question and have questions for God. It's okay to have questions for God.
It's normal.
But I guess it's more of like a, God, I'm sorry I didn't trust you. Or I'm sorry I lost that trust. Or whatever, you know. However, but I mean, we're allowed to have questions, and God expects questions. He expects us to be like, well, Lord, this, and this. Why this?
Why did this happen at this time? Why am I not getting this at this time?
He expects those things because we're human, or we're imperfect. So,
his ways aren't our ways.
Exactly. So his timing's not our timing. His ways are not our ways. His plans are not our plans, and his will is not our will, and we have to accept that, and accept it because it's better. Accept it because it's greater than ours. It's greater. His timing may not be not ideally what we want, but it's better than our. It's going to be better than our timing, and it's going to be because it's for a reason. His will better than ours. His plan better than ours, and
And I can say it is better than ours. It is way better.
It takes a while to accept that, but
Yeah.
once you see things happening or see things that you surrender to him and you're like, all right, God, I trust you with it, and then you see him working it out, or you see him like these blessings and these miracles. And I know personally from experience right now, it's like I don't see much right now with the situation, or I don't see much happening, and it's like, okay, I know I need to obey, I need to wait, I know I need to trust in his timing, but I can look back on other things that I've prayed for and see how they turned out 10 times better than I could have had, 10 times better than I was praying for, and it's like, okay, this situation right now, I can trust that it's going to be better than I could. Yeah. He's gonna work it out, and I can trust in that. And I think the last couple verses for Job, we'll read through Job 7:15 through 16.
Job 7?
Yes, Job 7:15 through 16. Says, I would rather be strangled, rather die than suffer like this. I hate my life and I don't want to go on living. Oh, leave me alone for my few remaining days.
That's real.
Now tell me that verse what's something we've all said.
Yeah.
I hate my life.
Yeah.
I don't want to go on living like this.
Yeah.
I don't want to be alive. I'd rather die than suffer like this. Like the amount of it's so sad the amount of times that I've heard that from people, or I've said it myself, or even thought it, or been like, I've said it to God, like, why I hate my life. Why would you make my life like this? Like, I didn't ask. That's a big one. I didn't ask for this. Yeah. But we didn't really ask for anything. Yeah. But that's just another one that goes on with the one from earlier. Like, I want to die. I don't want to live like this. I hate my life. But again, your life is uniquely the one God created for you, and he doesn't want you to suffer. He doesn't call you to suffer. He's waiting for you to come to him. And it's another thing. He's waiting for you to bring all of that to him. And if there's one thing I loved, and I've loved, like, learning with, like, church and everything like that, it's like God there's nothing you have that God can't handle. Like, all the stuff that you can bring to him, it's like all that you think is too much for anybody. It might be too much for some people, but it's not too much for God. It's never too much for God. And there's nothing that he can't heal. I feel like that's another big thing. There's nothing that he can't heal you from. Or there's nothing that he's always willing to help you through whatever it is. And I feel like that's really important for anybody out there, is like, let him in, let him heal you, let him give it all to him, tell him everything. And just, I pray for anyone out there who feels this way, that, like, you won't hate your life anymore. Because you'll find freedom, and you'll find that God loves you more than you could have ever imagined. And I know one thing about God is God chooses you before you choose him. So if you think you're going to go to God and, like, be rejected by him, that's not possible. God's not going to reject you. Now, I mean, we're sinful. We need forgiveness of our sins, and he offers that. It's why Jesus died on the cross for us, is because he wants that relationship with us, and he bore the weight of the sins of the world, just so that you can come to him, ask for forgiveness, repent, and find that freedom, find that healing, find all those things. And I guess to end it off, we can end it off with Job 30:17. Is I think a really good one. Job 30:17. At night my bones are filled with pain, which gnaws at me relentlessly. With a strong hand, God grabs my shirt. He grips me by the collar of my coat. He has thrown me into the mud. I am nothing more than the dust and ashes. I cry to you, O God, but you don't answer. I stand before you, but you don't even look. You have become cruel towards me. You use your power to persecute me. You throw me into the whirlwind and destroy the storm. And I know you are sending me to my death, the destination of all who live. Surely no one would turn against the needy when they cry for help in their trouble. Did I not weep for those in trouble? Was I not deeply grieved for the needy? And it goes on and on. My heart is troubled and restless. Days of suffering torment me. I walk in gloom without sunlight. I stand in the public square and cry for help. Instead, I am considered a brother of jackals and a companion of owls. I think, and the title of really Job 30 itself, the whole chapter is Job speaks of his anguish, and it's how he felt.
Yeah.
And this is Job is a perfect example of how angry he was at God, how frustrated he was, how he was just done. And like he didn't know what else to do, and he felt like God wasn't listening to him. And it's just, that's a perfect example of how honest we need to be with God, and like, take everything that you're feeling to him, and he may not answer you right away.
No.
And I feel like with Job, it was a waiting thing, and it was also the whole ordeal between God and Satan about God giving permission to Satan to tear him down, because God had faith in that Job could make it through. And as you can read and all the way through Job, I mean, Job finds peace.
Yeah.
He finds freedom. He finds he's restored by God, even after everything he went through. In the very last chapter of Job, in 42, Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do anything, and no one can stop you. And just a second ago, what I just read, Job was talking about how God was doing nothing for him, and now he's
just being open and honest with God.
He's just Job had his moments where he was like, I can't do this, but Job really never gave up hope that God,
the faith that God will come
God
through.
I mean, Job may have given up a little hope, but he never gave up his faith to God, because he still believed that God could do anything for him, and he believed that. And then the Lord ended up blessing Job at the very end, and Job had more than he could ever ask for. Like we said, he suffered through all of that, and granted, those things are horrible, but the Lord had faith in Job. The Lord knew that Job would make it through, and he did, and the Lord blessed him. And Job's a rough one.
Yeah.
Job's definitely a rough one.
Yeah, he went through a lot.
I think the next story we're gonna dive into is one of the rougher ones, I think. That most people don't talk about in the Bible, which I mean, there's an explanation for why. But the next story we're gonna talk about is Judas.
You would never think that his story would be in the Bible, but
no, they don't preach a lot about Judas.
They don't.
In churches, and you don't hear many people talk about Judas as an example. You just hear them talk about, and there's a saying, I know in the South, I grew up in the South, it's like people will call you a Judas. They're like, you're a Judas, and I never knew what that was until I learned more about the Bible.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, well, people are telling me I betrayed them, or I'm not trustworthy.
Yeah.
But Judas isn't one that's talked about for other reasons. He's only talked about for one thing, and that was betraying Jesus. And that was, a little backstory on Judas. He was a disciple of Jesus. He was chosen by Jesus.
Jesus' friend.
He was Jesus' friend.
Yeah.
He followed Jesus. He told Jesus, he was like, I'll follow you wherever you go.
Yeah.
He's like, I'll do whatever you ask me to do. And those things were true. He did mean those things. But because of the temptations of financial security and money, and how important money was back then in that time, he got overcome with the greed for money, and you know, he betrayed Jesus, turned him over to the Romans, and was part of Jesus being crucified. And now
that wasn't the end. A lot of people believe that was the end of his story.
No, everybody always ends it there. They're like, well, Judas betrayed Jesus. And as Christians, we can understand that, because when you actually really do understand and truly, like, fully know what Jesus went through on the cross, it's horrible. And, like, the torture and the things he went through because Judas turned him over, it's all horrible. And, like, you know, we never wanted that to happen to Jesus. Because of what he did. I mean, we're free from sin, but that should have been us. It should have been every single person, whether you're religious or not, whether you're of this race, like, every single person, that should have been us. And it wasn't. But it was also part of God's plan for Jesus. Jesus came on earth to follow through with that plan, to die on the cross one day for our sins. He lived 33 years here on this earth to experience, which we'll get into when we talk about Jesus, but to experience what we went through, to experience, like, to understand us and to understand what it's like to be human. But he also did it to bear the weight of the sins of the world. And, you know, Judas played a part in that.
So we needed Judas.
He needed Judas. Judas was a part of the plan.
We needed a Judas,
And it's so, because Jesus still treated him as a friend. Jesus still treated Judas as someone he dearly loved. And when we read the story, but Judas could have had a way out.
Yeah.
He did have a way out. But Judas's story is one of those that when you let mental health win, this is what happens.
Yeah.
Judas's story is one that shows what happens when mental health wins. We've been reading a lot of stories on what happens when you
overcome mental health, but this one is when you don't.
When you don't, you know, you'll see, like, when you don't seek help, when you stay in that isolation, when you stay feeling like there's nothing else, nobody's there for me, and it's a lie, because even though Judas did what he did to Jesus, he still could have been forgiven.